Good afternoon, I'm Angel, welcome to the channel. Today I want to tell you about a book that has created a star lately. This is Public Woman, written by Mónica Cabrejos, a former showgirl and current communicator and psychologist. Published in February by Planeta, Peru, this is her first book and the first one I have read by her. Frankly, I find it hard to categorize this book. It's like a life's journey, that is, a biography, since from the introduction to the last chapter this goes in a chronological order, but the guiding thread that I notice is a kind of call to fight in order to overcome the barriers society has traditionally imposed to women. In 159 pages, an introduction and 13 chapters, including controversial and revealing titles, Ms. Cabrejos reveals how, even before being born, her mother hoped to have a baby boy, and this illusion turned into disappointment when a girl was born. So, since she was a very little girl, she has perceived that difference in attitude towards boys and girls, and how that would influence their development as adults. From living with a sexual predator to having to leave school so as to work to deal with poverty, I can notice that her background may well be the one of millions of Peruvian people in general and women in particular, who start their lives in disadvantage. As well as what I mentioned before, they have to deal with street harassment since they are children and racial discrimination as well sometimes. At 12, she learned that the victim is blamed instead of the aggressor. A teacher punished her for saying that she stood up against one. She has had to deal with the fact that as a woman, she was vulnerable to be violated, like the incident in which a photographer touched her, without permission of course, in a beauty contest, and the organizers allowed him to keep his job. Perhaps the most polemic episode in her public life before becoming a university graduate was her job as a showgirl, one that in the late 90s caused outrage with her nude photos in a calendar. She posed naked. She claims she thought the following, that's on page 56. In such a male chauvinist country, a woman showing herself nude could be an act of rebellion. However, she knows that what she did is, as she states on page 59, a life sentence for immorality, which means that no matter how much she has studied, she will always be a whore for many. As it stated on page 99, a woman who has sex for money and one who enjoys her sexual freedom are judged in the same way. Because, as she says, what they find condemnable is the fact that a woman feels sexual pleasure. Well, sex has commonly been a taboo in Peru, let alone female sexual freedom. I know Mónica Cabrejos is as famous as infamous for many people. For some, she is a whore, libidinous, filthy, and infomaniac. Also, many call her quarrelsome, feminazi, unpleasant, who shows off when it comes to academic achievement, but who perhaps cannot even write a book on her own. A book that, on social media, some people say they will definitely miss. And she knows all of that. She also tells us about her love experiences, her achievements and failures, in an honest way, without the morbidity some people who consider her morally disabled might think. She uses terms like hegemonic masculinity, page 70, female submission, page 72, but so naturally. There's no bibliography. After all, this is not an academic work, but a testimony, in which we arrive in the most controversial aspects. The TV producer who convinces female workers to have sex with him and is a real jerk, and the loser who drugs her and rapes her while she's sleeping because he cannot conquer her while she's awake. I do have mixed feelings here. On the one hand, I believe her, that she has been harassed, dragged and raped. But on the other hand, she knew perfectly that this would cause outrage and people would start guessing who those men are, because they are not explicitly mentioned in the book, but there are enough clues to conclude. This has also been marketing for her book. I guess it's selling like hot cakes and she's being criticized for this. Why she's getting monetary benefit from her tragedy instead of filing a lawsuit. I wonder whether they have criticized her for admitting aborting twice, one of them being a miscarriage and the other voluntarily interrupted. Well, even though I have my position against abortion in general, her explanations were convincing to me. Anyway, Even though she is liked or disliked, I admire the fact that this woman has grown professionally, not because I look down to showgirls, but becoming a professional is an evidence of commitment and discipline. I like her book as a personal testimony, deeply personal, and though they are accusing her of playing the victim card, as a woman, as black, as coming from a poor background, I don't see any whining, but a reality we experience on a daily basis. That a woman in Peru is exposed to disadvantages from being controlled by a jealous man to find it hard to study, from being called a slut for enjoying sex to having to suppress her sexual satisfaction because that's a man's prerogative. I think this has changed for the better in the last decades, and she affirms that, but there's still plenty to do. As stated in an interview with the intellectual Marco Aurelio de Negri, whom she refers to in her book, it's not about women being better than men, but reaching equal rights. I have to agree with that kind of feminism. I also appreciate the fact that she's not promoting conflict between men and women, but is calling women to resist and to decide. Defend their freedom against that unfair rule that dictates that they can only be either saints or whores. Yes, some people might only see a call for sexual liberty instead of liberty in general, but the problem is in those people, not in the book. I recommend it, and I know that despite many of us having some level of prejudice towards a woman we, in our 30s or older, know well, at least when it comes to public life, it would be a good idea to forget the nude woman in the almanac and welcome the communicator and psychologist. There's always something to learn, I can say. Bye bye.